Star Wars games have been around almost as long as Star Wars itself, covering many aspects and genres. Star Wars Uplink is a podcast and feed dedicated to covering all Star Wars games, past and future, from news to interviews and so much more. Crank up the hyperdrive because it's time for the show. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, a podcast dedicated to Star Wars gaming. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, joined by Star Wars game Outpost writer, Jared Beilby.
Hey everyone, and as Darth Vader once remarked to Han Solo, we would be honored if you would join us.
In this episode, we'll be going over what genres we'd want future Star Wars games to explore, what eras, and which development teams.
Let's get started.
Let's start off with the Star Wars Rivals news. What do you think that means?
Personally, I think that it's for either a mobile game or it's just a smokescreen, or just some word that they needed to copyright for whatever reason. I know some people have thought that it might be a new animation series that they might be producing for after Rebels ends, but personally, I don't really think that is the case, just because the name Rivals is very similar to Rebels in my mind anyways.
Yeah.
So I feel like I don't think that's the case, but I mean, we'll see. I mean, there's a good chance that it's nothing. I mean, if you look in December of last year, I believe it was, there was Star Wars Forces of Destiny, which they trademarked.
Yeah.
And that was before The Last Jedi name was revealed. So everybody's like, is the next movie called Forces of Destiny?
Going into that a little bit, what do you think of the name The Last Jedi?
I really think it's a good name. It has a lot. It could potentially have a lot to it, just because it's minimalistic name. And obviously there's a lot of different, with the fact that Jedi can be plural or singular, there's a lot that it could mean. I mean, it could be relating specifically to Luke. It could be relating, to the Jedi as a whole. And so I think it could be a fun name. Obviously, it depends on what direction they go with the movie itself.
I'm interested to see how that will turn out. I mean, I've seen so many things like, please don't die, Luke, please don't die.
Yeah.
If they were to make a game out of the Rivals, what would you expect to see from it?
It sounds to me like it's some sort of mobile type game.
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem to me that it would be the name of, say, Visceral's new game or Respawn's game. It seems to me like it would be like a mobile game where you're doing some sort of player versus player online combat. Although there was Force Arena, which was a PvP mobile arena combat.
Yeah.
So I don't know like what they could go kind of branching out from that. But I mean, it seems the name Rivals obviously makes you think that you're going to be competing against somebody in some way.
Yes.
But I mean, as to what they could go in that direction, I have no idea. It would be cool to see a pod racing game again, but I don't think they'll go in that direction, since they haven't really been focusing too much on the prequels. But it would be fun to see a pod racing game.
I agree with you that it doesn't seem like a AAA title game, a AAA game title. It seems a lot like it would be just a mobile game.
Yep.
Like when you think of Visceral's game being called Star Wars Rivals, you don't really think it fits. I mean, Star Wars, the Visceral's game I would think would be a darker name.
Yeah, exactly. And something maybe more in line with a title that would fit with the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And I can't see a Star Wars movie being named Rivals.
Yeah. Definitely. Now, let's go on to our main topic, which is what genres we want to see for future Star Wars games. What would you like to see?
Well, the obvious one for me is an open world action adventure.
Yes, I think that's everyone's dream.
Since Star Wars hasn't really had any big games besides Battlefront, since that genre has really kind of exploded. in the past few years. So that's definitely something that I would love to see as a game that's open world exploration, and also has, you know, the action adventure elements to it. And last week, Blake Jorgensen for EA did mention that they are coming out with an action adventure exploration game, but he didn't say which game, although it's probably, I would assume it's Visceral's game, since that's the next one that's coming out.
Yeah. Let's see, Respawn made Titanfall, the Titanfall series, correct?
Yes.
So yeah, I would definitely see Visceral be going for the open world action adventure kind of game.
Mm-hmm. But it will be interesting to see what Respawn does, because I believe the Respawn game is also a third-person action adventure, which is a little bit of a detour from what they've done with. Yes, they are making Respawn Entertainment are making their own third-person action adventure game, so that it features a different style of gameplay and takes place in a different timeline that has been yet to be explored within the EA Star Wars titles. So that's a bit of a detour from their Titanfall series. And
yes.
Did they also start out with the COD? They've done Titanfall and Titanfall 2, but Zampella,
I believe some of
their founder, I believe, was involved with, if I recall correctly, yeah. Jason West and Vince Zampella, who created and were responsible for the development of Call of Duty before 2010. So obviously their history is more one of a first-person shooter genre,
which is definitely something, like you say, a detour of what they're known for, which is going to be interesting to see. And from the little clip that we saw with the EA Star Wars sizzle reel of all the development companies and everything, it had Respawn doing lightsaber battles. So that, along with exploring a timeline that has not been explored on the EA titles, definitely leads me to believe that it will be the prequel era. Or
yeah, I think
close.
that's definitely something that it could very well be, and I think that would be awesome, because again, we haven't really had a good prequel era game in a few years. And so the other thing too with like the prequel era is, even though the movies perhaps aren't some of the best movies out there, they still, along with the Clone Wars TV show, they still have a lot of wealth and a lot of canon to draw from for something that would make a game a lot of fun to play in. So I would love to see a prequel era game.
There's so much detail and information in the prequel era. I mean, there are so many Jedi that they could explore if they're going to go that way. They could do, maybe you are a Sith trying to go up the ranks and he has to fight the different Jedi to do that. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that they're going to go for a lightsaber focused gameplay.
Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, we haven't had one of those for a while. We had, was it Jedi Knight, I believe, had good lightsaber combat, the Jedi Knight games. Yeah, it's Jedi Academy is the game I'm thinking of. It's Jedi Academy, and there's a mod called Movie Battles, which is still pretty popular, and it's a mod for Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, which adds sort of a multiplayer element to the game with lightsaber battles.
So when Disney closed LucasArts in 2013, the developers at Raven Software, who did the coding for that, released the source code on SourceForge, which allowed all of those. That is definitely a series that Battlefront has taken from. Like a couple of the weapons, I believe, in Battlefront were taken from the Jedi Knight series.
Yeah.
What other genres would you like to see for future Star Wars games, and what eras would you want them to explore?
One genre that, it may not be nearly as popular, but one genre that hasn't really been touched again for a while is the strategy genre. There was Empire at War and Galactic Battlegrounds before that, and so it'd be sort of fun to see them revisit that. I don't think that genre will be revisited for a while, at least not to its fullest extent that it could be.
Yeah.
Just because I don't think that sort of genre really sells many copies. One, because it's mostly going to be stuck to PC, but I think that would be a fun genre to revisit. And then, of course, the one thing that I would love to see again is another Rogue Squadron game.
Yeah.
And something rebooting that series and bringing a full on arcade style space combat game set in the original trilogy could be really fun.
Yes, and Star Wars Rogue Squadron is definitely the best of the flight combat Star Wars games.
Mm-hmm.
They released that one for PlayStation 4 that was originally released on PlayStation 2, and I played that, and it was not the best.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting to see, and wasn't it Blake Jorgensen who said that for the next, 3 years, we're getting a Star Wars game a year?
I believe so, but that's for the next 3 years, that's Battlefront, Visceral's game, and Respawn's game.
Yeah. So I could definitely see them after those 3 games going into a Rogue Squadron game.
Yeah, I think that would be a fun way for them to revisit after.
Yeah, and going back to the strategy games, maybe they would do that. I mean, if they've got, maybe they could put some of the mobile developers on creating a strategy game for the PC.
Mm-hmm.
That could be something.
I mean, perhaps, but I mean, I think one thing is that there's Commander right now, which has a little bit of that real-time strategy element, and the thing with that is that will sell more copies, or not more copies, but it will make more money for Disney in the long run than releasing, say, a real-time strategy game and make it just for PC.
Yeah.
Just because Commander has those microtransactions and mobile games has those microtransactions, and that's what generates a lot of money nowadays.
Yes. You saw that with Nintendo trying to go for the pay once, and that did not do as well as they hoped it would.
And I mean, it's definitely unfortunate because, I mean, obviously microtransactions are kind of a touchy subject right now in the gaming scene as a whole, and they can, depending on how they do microtransactions, obviously they can kind of upset a lot of people, and only a small amount of people are actually paying for that. It's something like 1%. But so again, I don't think that real-time strategy would really come to the PC. I mean, that's just me surmising, but considering the fact that they could make a similar style game and make a lot more money.
Yeah. So what eras of Star Wars would you like to see? Prequel, sequel, or original trilogy?
Well, definitely prequel trilogy is the top of my list right now, just because we haven't had something in so long, and it would just be a great era to see again, especially with the graphical fidelity we have now. So, I mean, personally, I would love to see more explored in the prequel era, just because there is so much to go off of there, and I think we're gonna get plenty of stuff for the sequel trilogy. And the current Battlefront is the original trilogy, and theoretically Visceral's game is going to be set around somewhere in the original trilogy if we're basing it off of the concept art we've seen in that short little snippet of gameplay. So being able to experience the prequel trilogy again, I think, would be really fun.
Definitely. Would you think that they would start doing, as they are with movies, going into doing anthology video games? Like, that could possibly be Visceral's game right there, as an anthology explaining some occurrence that happened in the background of the main movies.
Yeah, certainly. I think that Visceral's game will definitely tell a story that is more something that you see behind the scene, or that's more behind the scenes of the movies. And I think that would be something that would be fun to experience, and I think that's probably where they're going to trend towards with Visceral's game and with Respawn's game, and hopefully with the campaign for Battlefront.
Yeah. Now, going into Battlefront, there have been a lot of recent news about the different eras that they're exploring. So recently it was Rogue One characters could be seen in Battlefront 2 and multiple eras. How do you think that they would do that?
Personally, I think that we could see, on the single-player side, I think we could see a campaign that kind of spans multiple eras, similar to how Battlefront 2's campaign spanned multiple eras.
Yeah.
On the multiplayer side of things, I think that those eras would obviously be segregated somehow. So you could do that either just simply on a per match basis. So if you have a playlist, you go and you play on Jakku, and it's going to be First Order versus Resistance. But then the next match, it goes to a new map, and you're on Endor, and you're going to play Rebels versus Empire. So that's one way they could do it. I do think that any original trilogy content will be included with any Rogue One content. I don't think they're going to separate it that far. The other way they could do it is they could completely have two separate sections of the game. So you go in and you choose, you want to play original trilogy content, so you go and you click original trilogy content, and you play maps and modes specifically for original trilogy, or you go into the sequel trilogy stuff and you play content specifically for that. But personally, I mean, beyond that, what they're going to specifically do, I have no idea. Is there anything that you would like to see how they do that?
Yeah, there are definitely, like you say, the different ways they could do that, but I see a problem with them separating it, because there are going to be those people that are going to just play the prequel or the original trilogy or the sequel era, and that could be a problem with getting into servers.
For sure.
But I would like to see where you go into the multiplayer era, like in Battlefront 1, and then you can go in there and choose a lineup of maps and things that you want to go through, and then say, like, I want to play original trilogy rotation playlist, sequel trilogy location playlist, and go through that as the different sides, and Rebels versus Imperials, First Order versus Resistance.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that would definitely be cool, but obviously, if you're doing something like that, I think it would be difficult to have a system like that where you're not jumping in and out of servers after every match. Unless there's a server browser and you set up a personal rotation that people can jump in. And so, I mean, who knows what they're going to do, but I think that a system like that could, take a while in between matches, because you're going to have to find a new server with the setup that you want. So, I mean, obviously something like that would be really cool, but I don't know if it would really work for multiplayer. I think that it would work on like a skirmish level where you would get to choose your playlist and play it the way you want to. So, I mean, I think probably the most likely way is that they might have, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of ways they could go about it. And I think that there's merits to each way, and there's pros and cons to each. So who knows? I mean, the one issue is you're gonna, no matter how they do it, how they do multiple eras, you're gonna have some people who are unhappy. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Would you want Battlefront 2 to go in a different UI direction completely?
Not completely, I don't think. I mean, if you look at like Battlefield 1's UI, definitely takes cues from Battlefront's UI, and I think they both are. And I think that, I mean, it's still, both of them are very clean UIs. I'm personally not a huge fan of the glaring white.
Yeah.
But I mean, and hopefully we get a server browser in the next game, because I think that would be beneficial. But I mean, I'm fine with the big icons for each of the modes and whatnot, and I think that it's fine. It's nice and clean and ordered. You know how to get to where you're going.
Yeah.
What do you think of the UI?
I agree with the blaring white statement. I mean, you see with Nintendo, it has a dark mode now, so that's what I would really want to see. Maybe go with a dark gray, or what I like about Battlefields is it has Earth in the background. I mean, if they could do the Earth in the background, but instead have Tatooine, Endor, all of these different maps and all of these different planets. That would be cool to see, and also
yeah, that would be a neat idea.
Give you kind of a heads up of where you're going to be playing in the different maps and eras.
I mean, that could definitely be fun for sure.
Something that they could do is have set planets, but also have those at different time periods. So you could play Tatooine as in the original trilogy, or you could play Tatooine set in the sequel trilogy, because that planet is still there in the sequel trilogy, or maybe it got blown up by the Starkiller base.
Yeah, I think we could see some crossover for maps. I think that would be a good idea. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there was like one map that was specific, to each.
Yeah.
Because I believe with like the original Battlefront games, Geonosis's map could only be played as the Clone Wars, and the Hoth map could only be played as the Galactic Civil War. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something similar. So like those generic Tatooine maps could be played on both.
Yeah.
But maybe there's like the Takodana map, for instance, with Miles's castle, and you could destroy the castle or whatnot. Maybe that's specific to sequel trilogy, whereas the Hoth map is maybe specific to the original trilogy or something. I don't know.
I definitely could see them doing that. Now, would you like to see DICE go in a different direction next game? Like if there was a Battlefront 3, would you want DICE to continue making it, or hand it off to a different development company and then have DICE do something completely different?
I mean, I think that really depends on how Battlefront 2 is received.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I could make a judgment call on if DICE should make Battlefront 3 based on how they did Battlefront 1. I personally enjoyed Battlefront.
Yeah.
And I think that the multiplayer is fun, and there's obviously some things that need tweaking. But right off the bat, I don't think that there's something that says, oh, DICE needs to be moved on to a different project, personally. And so obviously it depends too on how well they make Battlefront 2's multiplayer.
Yeah. I definitely think that DICE is going to continue making the multiplayer, and the other development teams that are going to be on there do the different aspects. Like, what is it? Motive. I think Motive will be doing the campaign, and Criterion will be doing a VR something for Battlefront 2.
Yeah, that's probably how it will happen with Battlefront 2. And assuming that is successful, which hopefully it will be, then I don't see why they should deviate from that formula for a future Battlefront.
Yeah, and it's crazy that they're bringing 3 development companies onto a single game.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely cool to see that happening, and hopefully it allows them to really focus on the different aspects that they do well at. So this way DICE can focus on the multiplayer aspect, and they're not splitting their time with a single player, which they did have to do for the first Battlefront, even though there wasn't very much single player content. And then hopefully, Motive, I know they're a new studio, but they've hired a number of people who are known for making good single player stuff. So hopefully they can really hone in on that. And then obviously Criterion was successful with the VR mission, so hopefully they can maybe expand upon that. And also, be it VR or maybe some sort of vehicular VR experience, because they're also known for their vehicle stuff. So
yeah,
I think that could be fun to experience and fun to see happen.
I've seen a pretty good chunk of negativity around a VR Battlefront 2 thing. People saying that the first one didn't do well and it doesn't really have a player base, but I don't think that should stop them from actually continuing doing VR for Battlefront. Because we were saying in a past episode of the Battlefront podcast about how it would be so awesome if you could go hang out in the cantina in VR.
Mm-hmm. That'd be pretty fun.
See all of the different aliens, and I think the future of VR will start doing different experiences like that, tie-ins through different movies. Maybe in the future we could be having an Indiana Jones VR experience or something that goes along with different movies, instead of just story-driven VR experiences.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go, and presumably there will be a VR experience for Battlefront 2. And I don't think that, I mean, who knows, but I don't think that they'll make the whole entire campaign VR. But I think that there'll maybe be one or two experiences somewhat similar to the Battlefront VR experience for the PSVR.
Now let's go into 1313, which was a canceled Star Wars game that was originally going to be released.
2013, I believe, was when it was planned to be released.
1313 in 2013. So, what do you think of that game?
Well, from what we know about it, it definitely is a game that looks like it could be very fun. And it was supposed to be focused on Boba Fett, which is obviously a character a lot of people love.
Yes.
Including myself. And so I think it's sad that it got canceled, especially because the other aspect of it, too, is that it was focused on the Coruscant underworld, which is an element of Star Wars that I really enjoy. Whenever the Clone Wars TV show had an arc set on the Coruscant underworld, I always really enjoyed watching those arcs. So it would have been really fun to get to experience that part of Coruscant in a video game setting, and so it's a shame that it did get canceled. Obviously, I can't make a full-on judgment on it because I never actually did play it. I mean, there's a possibility that it could be the worst game ever, but hopefully it would have been, and I don't think it would have been. I think that it had, from what I've gathered from it, there's a lot of cool aspects to it that hopefully they can bring into the future Star Wars games.
Yeah, definitely going into that aspect, what do you think they could use from 1313 for future games? I believe they said that they were looking at absorbing some of the different aspects of that game for future games.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I think they could, obviously the setting is something I would love to see explored further, the Coruscant underworld, and then also having a game focused on Boba Fett, and a game at the very least that's not centered completely around Force wielders.
Yeah, which I think what the original Battlefronts did wonderfully was it focused on the troopers mainly, which is something we hadn't seen before in past Star Wars games. It's mostly around Force wielders, lightsabers, and then they had the support in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope to see that continued on with the Battlefront campaign. I wouldn't mind having, a mission or two where we do play as a hero character, but I really hope that the campaign tells the story from the trooper's perspective.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's something that Star Wars 1313 would have done, is I think it would have, had a bit more story from the background characters' perspectives.
Yes. Now, from what we've seen, it was focusing on two different characters. Could you see a future Star Wars game focusing kind of like how the Lego Star Wars does, is where you can switch between the different characters for these different aspects of the gameplay?
Yes, definitely. Visceral's game, Amy Hennig, who is in charge of Visceral's game, has indicated that their game is more focused on an ensemble cast, and from what I've gathered from that is that we'll be able to explore the Star Wars universe from all of those characters' perspectives. So I think that that's something that we're going to see in Visceral's game when it comes out next year, is a Star Wars story where we get to experience and play as multiple characters in the same game.
Yeah, that would be something I would love to see, and I really enjoyed in Batman Arkham Knight how you could switch between the different characters in certain parts of the game. That was really fun to play.
Yeah.
So going back to the main discussion that we're having, which dev teams would you like to do for certain games?
Well, I would say that any of the, BioWare is obviously a developer that comes up in discussion a lot when it comes to Star Wars, because, they did the first KOTOR game, and they've had success with the Mass Effect series, I believe. So that's a developer that would obviously be fun to see exploring Star Wars. I don't think they will, because they are working on their own IP.
Yeah.
And so they're focusing on that. So, I mean, maybe, 5 years down the road, we might see BioWare do a bigger scale Star Wars game outside of the SWU MMO.
Yeah, right now it looks like they're going to be focusing just on Mass Effect, which is Star Wars-ish. And from what I've seen of Mass Effect Andromeda, it would be cool to see, instead of these Mass Effect worlds, have Star Wars worlds, and the different things that they can bring to the gameplay would be interesting to see.
Oh, certainly. I think I haven't followed Mass Effect Andromeda too much, but from what I've seen, it's has an awesome sci-fi setting, and I think that I have played a little bit of the older Mass Effect games, and I think that it would be fun to experience that type of gameplay in Star Wars.
Something that Sam from the Battlefront Podcast brought up was a Telltale-style Star Wars game would be interesting to see.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Telltale's obviously very good company, and any sort of game with that sort of, the episodic type game would obviously fit the Star Wars setting nicely, I think.
I think they would have to do it. I don't know. Let's see, who owns Telltale Games? Because EA has the rights.
Yeah, they would have to, what is it called? They'd have to expand their license.
Yeah. Well, they have done that with Lego Star Wars, so it isn't completely out of the question.
Yes.
So that could be interesting, but I don't know, because they are making a Marvel game, which is owned by Disney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like Telltale is their own company.
Marvel, they're doing, I believe, a Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So there is, they could do that because they're working with Disney already.
Mm-hmm.
So that could possibly be in the future.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The way that they've got Star Wars games coming out now is super high quality, and they're just looking 3 years in the future. So hopefully they're expanding some more, which I believe there would be, because Star Wars is definitely extremely popular and is a franchise I believe that will continue for at least another 20 years.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's gone 40 years so far, and definitely since Disney's owning it, it will continue in the future.
Oh, definitely. I can't see the end of Star Wars happening anytime soon, just because Disney is so good with having franchises last forever and building a relationship with the community, and same with Star Wars. It's a brand that really is very impactful and very meaningful to a lot of people, and with that in mind, I don't think Star Wars is going anywhere soon, and hopefully that means we get Star Wars video games yearly for the next X number of years.
Yes, because as our bumper says, Star Wars video games have been around almost as long as Star Wars itself.
Yep.
They were making games the early 80s,
mm-hmm.
and then I believe they were making arcade games before that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think very early 80s was the first Star Wars video game, some sort of arcade, like 81 or 82 or something. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head.
So the future of Star Wars is going to continue. You can definitely see that. Disney knows what they're doing, and I believe they have chosen very well with EA
mm-hmm.
to give the license to. I can't really think of another publisher that I would want to have the license of Star Wars.
Well, just because EA is such a big publisher, and they have a lot of resources that they can give to the Star Wars franchise, is one reason why I think that they're such a strong publisher to do that. What they could have done, which is kind of what Star Wars was doing before, is having games more individually just developed and published.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was normally they were published through LucasArts, but they were developed by an array of developers, and there wasn't quite the same blanket deal as they do have with EA. Something that's 10 years long.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm looking at the publishers, the top 10 publishers, and I definitely believe that they made the correct choice. I mean, they could have gone with Activision or Ubisoft, which I think those are the only other two that they could have chosen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those were the only ones, just because the Star Wars brand is so big. And making a AAA game, making one AAA game year in and year out, there's not very many other publishers that could do that.
Yeah. I believe that wraps up this episode of Star Wars Uplink.
Alrighty.
You can follow us on Twitter, which is at SWUplink, on Twitter, which is twitter.com/SWUplink. Follow Jared at SWGameOutpost. I'm at SWB Podcast on Twitter, as well as at TyeDyeSheepYT. You can leave feedback through our email, which is StarWarsUplinkPodcast@gmail.com, and leave reviews on iTunes.
May the Force be with you.
Always.